Today we're going to learn a new way to solve for zeros using what's called the quadratic formula. First, I want to review the things that we've learned to solve for zeros to start off. So we have a problem here, x squared plus 2x minus 8. Now the first way we learn to solve for zeros is by factoring. So to factor this, we can break it down into its factors. And hopefully you guys still remember to do this and are pretty good at it. This would be x minus 2 and x plus 4. And that's equal to 0. So if we set both of these factors equal to 0, x minus 2 equals 0 and x plus 4 equals 0, we find the zeros are at x equals positive 2 and x equals negative 4. That's one way of finding the zeros. The second way we use to find zeros is by graphing. Some people find that method is easier. So if we look at a graph of this, x squared plus 2x minus 8 you can see that we also have zeros. The zeros are where y value is equal to 0 and the graph goes through the x-axis. So you can see the graph goes through the x-axis at positive 2 and negative 4, just like before. Positive 2, negative 4. So the third way is by what's called the quadratic formula. Alright, so the quadratic formula is this big long formula right here. Alright, it looks a little bit confusing, but it's pretty easy to manage. So we need the equation in this form. It's called standard form. It's ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And then we just plug all of our values into this formula, and it's another way to find zeros. So for example, if a problem is not factorable, this is a surefire way to find our zeros. So in this problem, we could say a is equal to the number in front of the x squared. And we all know that there is a 1 in front of that x squared. So a is equal to 1, b is equal to 2, and c is equal to negative 8. So I just plug in my values into this formula and it spits out the answer for us. So notice here we have a negative b. So we put negative and then 2. Plus or minus. This is a new sign for us. We're going to keep it just like that, plus or minus, until the very end. So we have negative 2 plus or minus the square root of b squared. B is 2 squared minus 4 times a was 1 and c is negative 8. All over, everything is over 2 times 1. Alright, so now it's just a matter of simplifying this down. It may look big and ugly, but we'll take it piece by piece and see how we do. So we have x equals, this is a negative times 2, so it'll make it negative 2, plus or minus the square root of 2 squared is 4. Now this is where most people make errors at. This is negative 4 times 1 times negative 8. So if you find that you made some error, go back and look right here in this area. This is where 90% of the errors are made. It says negative 4 times 1 times negative 8. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 times negative 8 is positive 32. So we get positive 32 all over 2. So let's keep simplifying down. We have x equals negative 2 plus or minus, I can simplify inside the square root. 4 plus 32 is 36 all over 2. Now I can simplify a little bit more. The square root of 36 I know is 6. So I can say x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus 6 over 2. Now when we get down to this point, this is where I'm going to separate my plus and minus. This is saying that we have two answers, negative 2 plus 6 divided by 2 and negative 2 minus 6 divided by 2. So I'm going to split it up into two different answers now put over here. X equals negative 2 plus 6 over 2 and x equals negative 2 minus 6 over 2. Alright, so we have negative 2 plus 6 is 4 over 2. 4 over 2 is 2. So that's one of our answers, x equals 2. The other answer, we have x equals negative 2 minus 6 is negative 8 over 2. So we get x equals negative 4. So here's my two answers, x equals 2, x equals negative 4, which is the same answers we got by graphing and by factoring, right? So all three of those methods work. The only problem is sometimes we can't factor. So this might be the only method we can use. Also, we can always graph it, but you're going to come to find in the sections leading up that the graph won't always have zeros as well, and we'll have to use this method. But this method works for anything, the quadratic formula. Alright, I hope you enjoyed. We'll see you guys in class.